Ugh, ads are such poop. Subscribe to Acast Plus now to skip ads and more for just $1 a month. Click the link in our show notes to learn how. And hey, we're on Patreon too. Your support helps cover the cost of running a podcast. For $2 a month, you can get early access to all our episodes ad-free, plus bonus episodes exclusive to Patreon subscribers only. Visit patreon.com/sacrilegious discourse to sign up now. Welcome to Sacrilegious Discourse.
I'm husband.
And I'm wife.
Together, we're reading the Bible for the very first time.
We grew up without religion and wanted to know what all the fuss was about.
Well, what have we learned so far?
That God is a dick, and apparently some people believe in talking donkeys?
We're not trying to pass ourselves off as experts.
Nope, we're just reading the Bible for the first time and giving our first take reaction.
If you'd like to join us in this venture, you might consider starting at episode 1.
Otherwise, jump in wherever you like.
All right, let's go read the Bible.
Yeah, let's get to it. Husband!
Wife!
Do you know what we're doing?
Well, we just finished a book of the Bible.
We did.
So
Second
that must
Chronicles.
mean we're like wrapping it up, right?
I think we are, yeah.
So we're doing a wrap up?
We're doing a Second Chronicles Wrap Up.
Awesome. That sounds like fun.
Okay.
Well, let's go find out if it is, huh?
Well, here's the thing, and I'll leave this in the intro.
Yeah.
You know how we had 2 chapters left, and that was like a really long episode?
Yes.
Because there's so many rabbit holes and exciting and awesome, right?
Right.
Well, so that was a small thing with big, long, lots to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay, this wrap-up has like so much coverage, right? There's so much to cover.
Right.
But yet, really, it's not going to be that long.
Because we're not rabbit holing today.
No. And
So.
I just wanted to point that out, that is kind of funny to me.
No, I mean, yeah. Here's a king, there's a king, everywhere's a king.
And king's gonna king.
And kings are gonna king.
Yeah.
All right, let's go find out about these fucking kings.
Okay. Okay, so we wanted to do a Second Chronicles wrap up.
Yes.
But speaking of Second Chronicles is almost impossible without also speaking of First Chronicles, because they are actually one
and the
book.
same.
Yeah, it's one book cut in half.
Right.
And at that, it's impossible to talk about the books of Chronicles without also referring to First and Second Kings.
Because also same stories.
Right. And First and Second Kings are basically one book cut in half as well.
Right.
And while we're on the subject, the story actually began in First and Second Samuel.
Right.
So
it wraps there's a lot of things involved in these books.
Well, finishing up Chronicles wasn't just we finished Second Chronicles. We actually finished up a very large part of the Bible.
Right.
A very large story arc, the way the Jewish people divide the Bible.
Yeah.
It's more than what it is, if that makes sense.
Right. I get it.
So I wanted to say a little bit about First and Second Kings. Some of this will be recap. Some of this you will have heard before.
Okay. Yeah.
So with First and Second Kings, there was the question of who wrote that portion.
Yeah.
And some researchers proposed that either Isaiah or Jeremiah authored Kings. Now, we haven't read those 2 guys yet.
Right.
But we have heard of them because they were prophets that popped up.
Yeah.
Now and again. Jeremiah should sound really familiar.
Definitely remember Jeremiah.
He was recent.
Yeah.
So one of those prophet guys may have been the guy that wrote Kings.
Okay. Yep.
Others advocate that there were actually 2 or more authors for the Book of Kings and then they had a final editor.
Okay.
And then there's yet another theory that that Samuel wrote Joshua and Judges. Or I'm sorry, no, that's not correct. That a single author wrote Joshua, Judges, and both books of Samuel.
Okay. All right.
So there's just like no consensus in the research community as to who wrote them.
But definitely a different writer wrote Chronicles.
Yes, that is for sure.
Because I could tell, I could tell.
Well, and there's no reason that the same author would have written both.
Right.
For one thing, they were written from different time periods.
Right.
So, like 200 years apart or something like that.
Yeah.
So it would have been impossible. But that's beside the point.
Sure.
So books that no longer exist today, but that were used as references in writing kings.
Those fucking books.
We talked about them a lot. They came up a lot.
Yeah.
And for the large portion of what we were reading, they weren't named, and that's why we refer to them as those fucking books. Right. Those were the Book of the Acts of Solomon.
Okay.
The Book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. And the Book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah.
Got it.
Okay?
Okay.
So those are 3 of the books. There's more, but those were the 3 biggies.
Got it.
Okay?
Yep.
Jewish historical context. I wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
So in the original Jewish order of the Bible, the Book of Chronicles is the final book of the Old Testament.
Oh.
So we talked about what order the books go in before.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of forgot about it because that was several Q&As or setups ago.
Right.
But it's listed at the end of the Old Testament in Jewish Bibles because it summarizes the entire story of God's work from Adam all the way through humanity up until that specific point in history.
Got it.
So it's like a capstone. So that's why I say we did more than just finish the second book of Chronicles.
Got it.
We finished a capstone. Now, we skipped a lot to get there because the Jewish Bible is out of order from the Bible that we're used to reading, like the book that I have here on my shelf.
Okay. All right.
Which, by the way, if we were reading this book on the shelf, it shows that we are a little over 1/3 of the way through it.
That's it?
Well, I mean, in a way, it's like, oh, we have so far to go. But in another way, we've read over 1/3 of the Bible.
Right.
That's amazing. That's more than I've ever read of the Bible in my entire life.
Oh, yeah. I mean, every time we read another word, it's more
than
I've ever read in my entire life.
I know.
So,
I know it's a lot to go.
Right.
But I'm not looking at how much is left. I'm looking at, holy shit, we have read a lot of Bible.
We have.
So, the second book of Chronicles concludes the 3rd section of the Jewish Tanakh. So do you remember me saying that the Jewish people split the Bible into 3 separate categories?
Vaguely.
And so the first part would be the Torah, the law, and that's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy.
Okay.
Good on me. Okay. So that's the first one. So we have read that entire first section.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
That's in order and that's happy.
Right.
Okay. The middle section is the prophets is what it's called. Okay. We have only read some of that.
Okay.
We've read maybe about half of that.
So in the order we're reading them, those will come later.
Yeah. Yeah, they're coming up here shortly.
Got it. Okay.
And then the third one is the writings, and that's the least important portion.
Got it.
Of the Bible.
Okay.
And Chronicles is the last of those.
Okay. All right.
As the cap of the entire book.
Right.
Okay. Now the prophets are there's the 4 former or major prophets, and those are Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings.
Okay.
So we've read all those.
Yep.
And then there's the ones that I refer to as the 3 capable prophets.
Okay.
Because they're neither the major nor the minor.
Okay.
So they're merely capable.
Right.
I thought that was a good throwback.
Yeah.
And those are Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel.
Got it.
And then there's the 12 minor prophets.
Okay.
And those 12, they are all one book in the Jewish Bible.
Interesting.
So there's 12 different ones. They're split up in the Bible that we're reading, but in the Jewish Bible, the Hebrew Bible, it's all one book.
I wonder if the significance of 12 minor prophets is significant to the amount of tribes in Israel, because there's so much about 12, you know what I mean?
Could be. I don't know. Because there's 4 former ones, and then there's 3 capable ones. So you would think that...
Yeah, but they also remember the three.
Mm-hmm.
Remember they like 3 people too.
Right,
so.
But the 4 major ones are the most important ones. So you would think that, I don't know,
Yeah.
I think that might just be a coincidence.
Got it.
So, okay, so the Torah consisted of 5. The prophets consisted of 8. Okay?
Okay.
And now the writings that is the final unimportant portion consists of 11. And that makes a total of 24 books that make up the entire
Old Testament.
Old Testament
right.
for the Hebrew Bible.
Sure.
Okay? And that one is going to include Psalms and Proverbs.
Oh, boy.
Ruth, the book of Ruth is actually one of those.
Okay.
And we've read that.
Yeah.
And then Chronicles.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
So then we get into 1st and 2nd Chronicles.
Okay.
So sometime after the exile, a Jewish scholar compiled material from various historical resources, like the ones that we talked about before.
Those fucking books.
Right. Those fucking books, but as well as other records to include the books of Kings.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So somebody sat down with all of that shit to chronicle the history of his people.
Okay.
And Ezra has been cited as a possible candidate. And that one is a very strong candidate because 2nd Chronicles ends right with in the middle of a sentence, basically. Okay. And then the next book is Ezra.
Oh.
And the book of Ezra starts
right where that left off.
It repeats that sentence.
Oh, okay.
And that's often the way scrolls were situated so that you could tell which scroll came next.
Okay.
They would repeat the last sentence of one would be the first sentence of the next.
Got it.
But that's also why they think perhaps Ezra
is the writer.
Got
it.
So there are numerous mentions. This is beside the point a little bit, but I just thought that it would be fun to mention because we pointed that out just in our last Q&A yesterday, that there are numerous mentions of secular historical figures, non-Jewish foreign leaders who played prominent roles in the political fortunes of Judah.
Yeah.
And that was really fun to read in our Q&A yesterday.
I love that stuff. Like I was talking to somebody on social media, and I love how I think it helps you get out of the bubble of the Bible, right? Mm-hmm. Like it helps you say, oh, there's other shit going on out in the world, and these other historical events are happening regardless of what the Israelites are going through over in their little bubble over here in the Bible.
Right. Right. It kind of helps you understand a larger perspective.
Oh, yeah.
And some might say that the historical events corroborate the Bible, but I look at it the exact opposite, that the Bible being stories and records of the way people thought corroborates history.
That's the part that I like about the Bible, and that's part of why I wanted to read it, is because it is a historical record of some type.
It is.
And I think the part that is missing it's not missing, they do it on purpose, but the part that would be better served for people to understand is the greater significance in humanity that these people held in all of society, not just in Christianity and Judaism.
Yes.
So
totally agree. So then the next point that I wrote was, okay, but what's the point? Like, why have 2nd Chronicles, 1st Chronicles, all of the Chronicles mirroring 1st and 2nd Kings?
Right.
Yeah. Like, what the fuck is the point?
Yeah.
Well, together with the books of Samuel, Kings was written around 550 to 560 BCE during the Babylonian exile.
Oh, okay. All right.
While Chronicles was written after the exile was over, around 450 to 440 BCE.
Okay.
So there's a 100-year gap there.
Right.
And that is part of the difference. That is part of, it was different people with different agendas writing to different audiences.
Got it.
And it's hard to remember that because we're reading these two things and it's like, it's just a repeat of the same history.
Right.
But it's important to keep in mind it would be like reading a history book from an author that wrote in the 1950s versus a history book that was written today.
Well, I will say that I think, 1st Kings and 2nd Kings struck me as a very, very straightforward record of what was going on for the most part, other than a few sections that were, a little bit of just people saying what they wanted to say. But and that was and it felt like the kings kept getting worse and worse and worse as we went along, right? So they're and like you said, this is going into the Babylonian exile, so they're recognizing that things are going to shit, right?
Yeah.
So the chronicler, though, he goes on and on and on about David and all kinds of other shit about how it's very hopeful.
Yes.
It's much more hopeful toward his religion than King's was, I believe.
And there was a purpose for that.
Right.
So,
it makes some sense, knowing that.
Right. And that does make it a little easier to swallow once you've gotten all through it.
Yeah.
And by swallow, I don't mean believe, I mean digest.
Sure. Yeah.
Samuel and Kings, all four of those books all together.
Yep.
They address the Jewish experience of the Babylonian exile and captivity.
Okay.
Whereas Chronicles had an agenda to motivate, as you said, the freshly released slaves and to inspire hope.
Right.
So, I mean, those are two entirely different. Like, one is just recording what's happening.
Yeah.
And the other is using that information as a starting point.
Well, that's why there was a lot of stuff glossed over in Chronicles that wasn't glossed over in Kings.
Exactly.
It's two different takes on the same thing.
Exactly. I mean, just to reiterate the point you're making here and hammer it home, the chronicler's spotlight is on the triumphs of David and Solomon,
right,
rather than their respective failures of adultery and idolatry.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's clear.
And you could apply that to some of the other kings, too, because there was many kings that they glossed over their failures and only portrayed their good things. Or if the chronicler did say anything about the failures, it was like a sentence at the end, like,
right.
And da-da-da-da.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it.
It was like, and here's but anyways.
Right, yeah.
So the chronicler focused primarily on the kings of Judah, which we know.
Sure. Rather
than the kings of Israel, because at that point, the kingdoms were divided after the death of Solomon.
Well, the kings of Israel would have been very much less meaningful to the Israelites at that point, because they were probably solidified into one thing at that not one thing, but like closer to one thing.
They were all doing quote unquote evil things and had rejected the lifestyle, the way.
Right.
The kings of Israel, if they're mentioned at all in Chronicles, they're only mentioned tangentially, like as required.
Right.
And then this gets back into what I said earlier, that Second Chronicles truly leaves the story unfinished, in that the last verse of Second Chronicles is not a complete sentence.
Yeah.
Now, the way we read it, it reads as a complete sentence because of our translation.
Yeah.
And because it's easier to do it that way.
Sure. Yeah.
But the sentence is finished at the beginning of Ezra, as Ezra chapter 1 mirrors the end of Second Chronicles.
Got it.
And I thought I would just read those.
Yeah.
Just to kind of understand where we're at. So I'm going to be reading two separate things, part of which are the exact same thing. So it's going to sound like I'm reading it twice. Okay.
Yep.
So this is the end of Second Chronicles, chapter 36, verse 22.
Okay.
In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, one of our prophets, the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm and also to put it in writing. Now, verse 23. This is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah. Any of his people among you may go up, and may the Lord their God be with them. Be the end.
Right.
Okay. So then we go into the book of Ezra. Okay. Chapter 1, verse 1. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm and also to put it in writing. Now, verse 2. This is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah.
Yeah.
Now, verse 3. Okay. Any of his people among you may go up to Jerusalem in Judah and build the temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, the God who is in Jerusalem, and may their God be with them. Now verse 4. And in any locality where survivors may now be living, the people are to provide them with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with freewill offerings for the temple of God in Jerusalem.
Okay.
So you see that they mirror each other. They're exactly the same, but the structure is different. The verses are set differently.
Yeah.
So that is what I have brought to you today. And that wraps up Chronicles and sets us as ready to start the book of Ezra.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us all the way through another book of the Bible.
Yes.
And we are going to be back tomorrow with a contradictions episode for 2nd Chronicles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to be doing a book club. And I think we've solidified that we're probably doing a quote-unquote 500th episode.
Yes.
A special at some point.
Yes.
So those will be the upcoming episodes. Definitely tomorrow will be contradictions.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll see you guys soon.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, wife, I guess that's the end?
But husband, that's just sad.
It doesn't have to be. We are on lots of social media platforms like Twitter. Our handle there is sacrilegious_D.
For D's nuts.
Oh my God. Stop doing that. Anyway, we're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. There's a link to all of our social media sites at our website.
Ooh, we have a website?
Yeah, it's sacrilegiousdiscourse.com, where you can also find a link to our merch shop.
We have a merch shop?
Yep, we have podcast-themed clothing, mugs, notebooks, and more, as well as an atheist and science-themed products.
Wow, our fans should really go check that out right now.
Definitely. They can get in touch with us by sending an email to sacrilegiousdiscourse@gmail.com. But before they do that, we could really use some help.
Oh yeah? With what?
Well, it's not free running the podcast, and we need some financial support in order to get better equipment, which will free up time so we can concentrate on our podcast and our fans.
Okay, so what should they do?
Head over to patreon.com/sacrilegiousdiscourse and sign up as a contributor on our podcast. Supporters there receive additional bi-weekly episodes that we record just for our Patreon members for as little as $2 a month.
Also, we'd really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe on whatever platform you're using.
And Apple Podcast reviews help us out tremendously.
Like and subscribe. Leave an Apple review. Join us on Twitter. Support us on Patreon. That's a lot of instructions. Don't forget to say thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.